Hello and welcome to Pickleball Therapy, the podcast dedicated to your pickleball improvement. I hope you're having a great week. My name is Tony Roig. I'm your host of this weekly podcast, bringing you tips and helpful information to get you not just general pickleball improvement. We do that sometimes, but oftentimes we find ourselves talking about the mental aspects of pickleball, the mind, such a powerful part of our experience and our engagement with the sport. I just finished a recording of a podcast with my friend Natasha Linton and my new friend Neely Steinberg from the Real Housewives of Pickleball. We talked about a whole bunch of stuff. Highly recommend you check out that episode when it drops. But one of the things that they had discussed in a prior episode of their podcast was about a comment that was made by Leah Jansen, a professional player, about intensity. In other words, about the idea of intensity and being too intense when you were in a practice. And so basically it went something like this, where Leah was on the Pickleball podcast, the one by Zane Navratil and Nico the Lefty. And she was talking about, players who say, come on, when they're in what she calls a practice session, right? Which is just a rec game or a non-sanctioned, not like a non-tournament game. And basically it was like, show me you're an amateur without telling me you're an amateur by saying, come on, during a rec game. And her take was that you shouldn't act like you just like won Wimbledon or something during a rec game. And so that got me thinking about this concept of intensity. So I'm going to dive into the concept of intensity in this podcast. We're going to talk about, levels of intensity and how to maintain it while you're playing. So this will be, this will help you while you're out there on the court. But before we dive into that, I wanted to, address the comment by Leah about saying, come on, when you're in a rec game. And I think the issue there actually has to do with context. So Leah's a professional player. So Leah is going to, the highest expression of the game for her is a championship, Sunday match at the PPA, right? So that's the highest expression. And obviously any PPA tournament game would be a high expression of the game for her. For the average player, right? Wednesday morning at the local facility or at the YMCA or on the local courts, probably going to be the highest expression of the game for us, right? And so I think, I would disagree with Leah on her framing of it. If she's saying that, as a pro player, she's not going to say, come on in a rec game. I respect that. That's perfectly fine. That's her right to do that. But I think, as a rec player, if you're in your Wimbledon, right, you're playing in your Wimbledon and you're excited about it, I think it's perfectly fine to share that excitement with your emotions, right? With your statements, right? Come on, and things like that are perfectly fine. I play both tournaments and rec. And then, there's rec times when I'm playing, with my group and we're having a fun time. And then there's like a really nice shot and we'll hoot and holler, we'll do whatever. Just having a good time, right? Enjoying the sport, enjoying this activity. So, but let's talk about intensity, right? In terms of like our playing, what is it, how can we navigate that? How can we manage our intensity a little better? And intensity, right, is the idea of you can think about it like being like a same as focus, right? Like intensity, focus, drive, like being in the moment, if you will, while you're playing, being like locked in, right? In terms of what's going on the court. I think, what Leah was talking about was the expression of that intensity, right? Through a come on and things like that. That's just really like that's like a safety, not a safety valve, but a release valve, right? Like you have the pressure cooker, the little thing that goes on and lets go of the pressure. Oftentimes those come-ons and things like that are those types of things. But let's talk about like how we sometimes intensity and being too intense actually can hamper our play. And then talk a little bit about the ebb and flow of focus, the ebb and flow of intensity while we're playing out there. So I want to start with this idea of redlining. Okay. And it's something that I've been looking at for a while now as I study this game, as I study players who do it. And like in the pro game, there's a couple of players like on the women's side. Kate Fahey is pretty well known for being, redlining, like screaming directly at their opponent, like in their face kind of a thing. And then in the men's side, recently, last year it was Federico Staksrud was doing a lot of that where he was like, he wasn't yelling at his opponent, but he was letting out these huge, like almost like werewolf transforming in the middle of the night kind of howls after rallies. And what I've found is, and more on Federico than on Kate, because I've studied more Federico's matches towards the end of tournaments, right? When I do my breakdowns, is I've noticed like when he was doing it, you could see like a negative effect based on what would happen next. So you see like uncharacteristic misses and things like that shortly after the big outburst, the big, release. My sense of that is that what was happening was it was just too much release, right? It was almost like letting out too much steam, right, from the pressure cooker, if you will, and then you don't have enough pressure left to keep focusing, to keep going. So that's something I think it's worth considering, right, when you're playing out there is, if you're letting off a lot of emotion while you're playing, whether it's commands, whether it's other things like that, be mindful of letting too much steam out of the pressure cooker, because just like in a pressure cooker, you actually do want pressure in there, right? You want it to, finish cooking the beans or whatever you have cooking in there. And if you release too much pressure, right, then they're not going to cook, which doesn't get the job done. When you're playing pickleball, it's natural to feel pressure, right? And I think I like Billie Jean King, the tennis great, quote on this, where she said, pressure is a good thing because pressure lets you know that you care, right? Feeling pressure lets you know you care about the activity. So pressure itself isn't bad. Too much pressure can be bad. Letting off too much pressure can be bad. So it's finding like a nice balance of pressure, like the pressure cooker, and keeping that going. And I think redlining or, going too far on the, either, letting out too much pressure or expressing too much pressure, I think can be troubling. And likewise, you can also, you can have too low, right? You can go too low on the focus or on the intensity side. And that happens, right? Sometimes what happens is you're out there and maybe, you're feeling some negative energy from your partner and things like that. So that can then affect you the other way, right? Your intensity can go too low. So, what can you do to find this balance of intensity, right? That's going to get you through the match in the best way possible. One thing would be, we each need to know ourselves. Okay. So, for some players, you're more chill. Other players, you're less chill, right? That's just your personality. That's just how you are. And what you want to do is find the Goldilocks zone that works for you, right? Find the balance of intensity, right? Without redlining, without going too far, that allows you to then stay in the moment, focus on what's going on, allows your brain clarity, right? To be able to do the job out there. And again, it's going to be different for you. So I don't have I don't have a one size fits all here in terms of get to intensity level number 5 for you. But, one way to think about it would be using a scale, right? So you could say, okay, on a 10 would be like, I'm completely out of my mind out there, right? Intensity, it's too much. Like I'm going to get crushed under the amount of pressure that I'm feeling right now. And then, a 1 would be like, I could care less about what happens right now. I would say for most of us, if you can get to 6 to 7 intensity, right, and keep it there the whole time, you're going to be good. That's where these outbursts of come on and stuff like that can potentially be detrimental. I'm not saying not to do it, right, but say you're trying to stay within a 6 or a 7, right, and you're right at a 7 or 7.1, and you say come on or a big high five to your partner or a chest bump or something like that, probably going to stay around there. If you're on a 6 to a 7 and all of a sudden you're screaming like a crazy person out there and letting go of everything, what happens is you go from a 6 to 7, maybe you're down to a 3 next time, right? Because you release so much energy. And one way to think about this piece that might help you is think about when you finished a game. So you have a game that's a pressure game, right? So you're in one of these pressure games and it's just, you're feeling all the tension and then the game ends, right? There's a cathartic release, right? It's very natural. You have this cathartic release that happens. After the cathartic release, you're not going to be able to perform like you did 2 minutes ago while you were in the middle of the tense match. There's a really interesting story that happened to tennis player Brad Gilbert. He wrote, I think it's called Winning Ugly. He was a top tennis player back in the day, but he was a very good player, but he never really got to the ranks of a McEnroe or Connors. He was just right underneath that level of notoriety and success. But there was a match where he was playing Jimmy Connors. I think it might have been in the Open, but he was playing Jimmy Connors and he hadn't beaten Jimmy Connors. And so Jimmy Connors hits on match point, hits an overhead. It's long or out of bounds. I don't remember if it's long or wide, but it's out. It's called out. Brad comes up to the net to shake Jimmy's hands. And basically when the ball is out, called out, Brad releases everything. It's just all out, right? And Jimmy decides to challenge the call with the ref. This is back before all the videos and stuff like that. And the way Brad tells the story, after like 3 or 4 minutes, the ref overrules the call and calls it in. And what Brad said, right, in his description of what happened was he was toast. Like, he was done. He had already released all of that energy, all of that intensity, all of that pressure right inside the pressure cooker was gone. He'd opened the lid, basically. And so now he just didn't have anything left to give. And then Jimmy ended up beating him in that match. But the idea here is, you know, you want to monitor your intensity, and you want to get it around that, 6 to 7 range for yourself. And then do your best to keep it in that 6, 7 range, avoiding excessive outbursts, and also avoiding artificial bump ups. So an artificial bump up to me, and we see this a lot in the pro games when we're at the tournaments watching matches, is you'll see the team go back to serve, right? And the two players, they're trying to pump each other up. So they're like, let's go. It's go time. Now's our time. Let's go, all the time. And they just do it. They do it incessantly, right? Let's go. Let's go now. Let's go. Here's the thing. If you use that all the time, guess what? It loses its meaning, right? It loses its power, its impact. So if you want to use those kind of things, like, okay, let's go, or let's hunker down, let's focus, use them sparingly, right? Use them when appropriate. Pull them out of your pocket and apply them. Right? Use the card, if you will, when it makes sense to do so and when you really need it. If you use it all the time, then what are you going to use when you actually need something? Because if you're just saying let's go all the time, then what's the let's go for when you really, really, really want to let's go, right? So consider that idea, right, of not overutilizing tools that are intended to prop up your intensity. One thing that we teach in our coaching is in our camps and things like that is like, return to serve position is absolutely critical, right? Where you're standing to return serve. Being in a ready body position is important, right? In every rally. But then the idea is when you get into like a rally that is particularly important, right? Particularly meaningful. It's like 8-8, 9-9, 9-8, whatever, something like that. Something like, okay, we got to get this one. What I tell students is to crouch down a little bit more. So wherever you're standing, you basically come down like an inch or inch and a half more, right? That alerts your mind that, wait a minute, okay, there's something happening, right? That I need to pay more attention to. And that gets you ready to, like the alert is up, right? So the everything's, the red lights are flashing. You got to pay attention now. It's super effective, works very well, but it wouldn't work well if you did it all the time. So if you basically squatted down an extra inch and a half every rally, now that becomes your new baseline, your new normal level of intensity, right? And so now you're going to have to lower 3 inches, right? Or whatever. So, it's the kind of these techniques of let's go, or, hey, let's hunker down now. It's that kind of thing. Use those sparingly to get you to that, again, 6 to 7, I think is a good range to think of in terms of intensity. And then the last thing I want to leave you with on this is understand that your intensity or your focus is going to ebb and flow. There's no way that you can operate at 100% max focus, max intensity for an entire session. It's just not a thing, and to expect that of yourself, then just puts too much stress on you, right? Too much negative stress, too much like worrying about it. Like, well, how come I'm like not at 100% all the time? It's just not doable, guys. Even the pros, right? Pro players at every sport, they have ebbs and flows in their focus. They're trying to do is maintain that 6 to 7, right? They understand that they might dip a little bit. They might pop up a little bit, right? But if I can kind of keep it in that operating range, that works best for me, that Goldilocks intensity level, that's going to be the best for me and my performance. But I do understand that there are times that like I was playing just yesterday and, like there was a serve and for some reason I had looked at something right before the serve was hit, like off to in the distance, right? And we're in an indoor facility. I saw something, caught my eye, right? Whatever it was, caught my eye. And then I looked down ready to return serve and I missed the return of serve because I was still thinking about the thing that I had looked at, right? I'm not going to beat myself up about that. I'm not going to be like, oh my God, how did I do that? I can't believe I did that. And whatever, it's okay. It's life, part of the deal, no big deal. And then you just come back to what's the next rally? Let's get going. Let's keep working within the 6 to 7 range and keep your intensity around there. The better you are at avoiding, again, the super highs and the super lows, the better you're going to play, understanding that you will have some movement up and down in that process. So Hopefully this helps you next time you play, regulating your intensity, regulating your focus, keeping it within a band that works. If you have a really exciting rally and you want to let it out, don't listen to any of us to stop you from doing that. Enjoy the game like it's your Wimbledon and have fun when you're out there. So hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. If you enjoyed it, please consider rating and reviewing it wherever you listen to podcasts. And as always, have a great week. And I will see you next time on Pickleball Therapy. Be well.